The metal chains around Kira's wrists felt cold against her blue skin as she stood before the High Council of the Valari Empire. Her red eyes burned with anger, but she kept her head high like a true warrior should. The great hall was filled with hundreds of her people, all watching as she faced the most shameful moment of her life. Elder Voss stood at the center of the curved table, his ancient voice echoing through the chamber. Kira of House Tau, you stand accused of attacking a human diplomatic vessel without orders. You have brought shame to our empire and nearly started a war with Earth. How do you answer these charges? Kira's jaw tightened. The humans have been weak, their ship barely armed. They had no right to fly through Valari space like they owned it. I acted to protect our honor, Elder. The humans showed no respect for our boundaries. A murmur ran through the crowd. Elder Voss raised his hand for silence. The humans were invited guests, traveling under safe passage. Your actions violated the peace treaty our empire signed with Earth Colony Command. The word stung worse than any physical blow. Peace treaties were for the weak. The Valari had once been the greatest warriors in the galaxy, feared by every other species. Now they sat at tables and talked with soft creatures who could barely lift a weapon. The evidence is clear, Elder Voss continued. Warrior Kira fired upon the human vessel Harmony, causing severe damage and injuring 12 crew members. Only quick action by their captain prevented multiple deaths. Kira remembered that day 3 months ago. She had been leading a patrol near the border when a human ship appeared on her sensors. Something about their casual flight path had made her blood boil. They flew through space like they belonged there, like they were equals to the mighty Valari. Her finger had found the trigger before her mind could stop it. I have consulted with the human authorities, Elder Voss said, his voice growing heavier. They demand justice, as is their right under the treaty. Normally, such an attack would mean death or life imprisonment. Kira lifted her chin higher. Death she could accept with honor. Prison would be harder, but warriors had endured worse. She would not beg for mercy. However, the elder continued, the humans have offered an alternative punishment, one that they claim will teach you the value of their way of life. A chill ran down Kira's spine. The humans wanted something else, something that made the old elder look uncomfortable as he spoke. Elder Voss pulled out a data pad and read from it. The human colony in New Haven has requested a diplomatic marriage. You will be wed to one of their citizens and live among them for 5 Earth years. During this time, you will learn their customs and serve as a bridge between our peoples. The hall erupted in shocked voices. Marriage to an alien was unthinkable in Valari culture. It was worse than death, worse than any torture. To be bound to a weak human male, to live among their soft society, to bear the shame for the rest of her life. This is madness. Kira shouted over the noise. I would rather die with honor than live in such shame. Elder Voss slammed his staff on the floor, the sound echoing like thunder. The choice is not yours to make. The High Council has voted. You will accept this marriage or face immediate execution for treason against the Empire. Kira felt the world spinning around her. Execution for defending Valari honor. The Empire had fallen further than she thought possible. The human male is named Tom Miller. The elder continued reading from his pad. He is 28 years old, works as an engineer on New Haven Colony, and has volunteered for this arrangement. You'll depart for Earth space within the week. Volunteered. The word made Kira sick. What kind of pathetic creature volunteered to marry an alien warrior as punishment? Probably some desperate fool who could not find a human female to tolerate him. I will not pretend to love this human, Kira said through gritted teeth. I will not play house with your pet species. Elder Voss nodded slowly. No one expects you to love him, but you will treat him with basic respect as required by the treaty. You will live in his home, participate in colony life, and cause no trouble. Any violence against humans will result in your immediate execution. The elder's words hit like physical blows. Living with a human, pretending to be his wife, acting weak and submissive like human females. The very thought made her want to tear something apart with her bare hands. Your ship leaves in 3 days, Elder Voss announced. Use that time to prepare yourself. Remember, Warrior Kira, you carry the honor of our people even in this punishment. Do not make us regret showing mercy." As the guards moved to escort her away, Kira looked around the great hall one last time. The faces watching her showed a mixture of pity and disgust. She had become an example of how far the mighty Valari had fallen. 3 days later, Kira sat in the cargo hold of a transport ship, her few belongings packed in a single bag. The human pilot had tried to make conversation, but gave up after her cold stares. She spent the long journey to New Haven staring out the small window at the stars, wondering how her life had come to this. The transport finally docked at New Haven's small space station. Through the airlock came a human male of average height, with brown hair and gentle eyes. He wore simple work clothes and carried himself with quiet confidence. "You must be Kira," he said in accented Valari. His pronunciation was careful but respectful. "I'm Tom Miller. Welcome to New Haven." Kira looked down at the man who was now legally her husband. He seemed so small, so fragile compared to Valari males. His skin was pale and soft, his frame lean rather than muscular. This was what the great Valari Empire had reduced her to. "Let me be clear, human," she said in English, her voice cold as space ice. "I am here because I had no choice. Do not expect me to be a real wife to you. I will follow the terms of my sentence, nothing more." Tom nodded calmly. "I understand. I'm not expecting anything beyond basic civility. Your room is ready, and you're free to come and go as you please within the colony boundaries." His calm acceptance somehow made Kira even angrier. She had expected fear or anger, or at least some reaction to her hostility. Instead, this human just accepted her rejection like it meant nothing to him. As they walked through the colony's corridors, Kira saw humans go about their daily lives. They seemed so casual, so unguarded. On Valari worlds, everyone moved with purpose and awareness, ready for conflict at any moment. These humans just lived. Tom's home was modest but clean, with large windows showing the colony's gardens and workshops. He showed her to a separate bedroom, already prepared with basic furniture and clothes in her size. "Dinner will be ready in an hour if you're interested," Tom said from the doorway. "No pressure if you prefer to eat alone tonight." After he left, Kira sat on the bed and stared at her reflection in the window. 5 years. 5 years of this weak, shameful existence before she could return home. She clenched her fists and made a silent promise. She would survive this punishment and return to the Valari Empire stronger than ever. She would show everyone that even living among humans could not break a true warrior spirit. But first, she had to endure 5 years married to the quiet human engineer who seemed to accept everything with infuriating calm. 5 years of pretending to be something she was not. 5 years that would change everything she thought she knew about strength, weakness, and what it truly meant to be a warrior. 3 weeks had passed since Kira arrived on New Haven, and she had barely spoken 50 words to Tom. She spent most of her days exploring the colony's boundaries, testing how far she could walk before the security sensors would alert the authorities. The human settlement was larger than she expected, but still felt like a cage to someone used to flying between star systems. Every morning Tom would knock softly on her door and ask if she wanted breakfast. Every morning she would ignore him until he went away. She could hear him moving around the small kitchen, preparing food for himself before leaving for work. He never complained about her silence or demanded she join him like a Valari male would have done. The other humans in the colony watched her with curious eyes but kept their distance. Word had spread quickly that she was a Valari warrior who attacked a human ship. Some looked afraid, others seemed fascinated, but all of them gave her space. She preferred it that way. Kira had found a spot on the colony's outer wall where she could sit and watch the workers in the fields beyond. Human farming was different from Valari methods, where her people used powerful machines and chemical enhancers to force crops to grow quickly. These humans worked slowly and carefully. They tested soil, rotated crops, and seemed to actually care about the plants themselves rather than just the final harvest. It disgusted her how much time they wasted on such gentle methods. A Valari farmer could produce 3 times as much food in half the time, yet somehow the human crops looked healthier and tasted better than anything she remembered from home. She had tried some vegetables from Tom's small garden behind their house and been surprised by the rich flavors. On her 24th day in the colony, Kira was sitting in her usual spot when she heard shouting from the engineering section. She looked down to see humans running toward one of the large buildings that hummed with machinery. Smoke was rising from several windows, and people were evacuating in what looked like panic. Her warrior instincts kicked in, and she jumped down from the wall, landing easily despite the 10-foot drop. She ran toward the building, pushing through the crowd of worried colonists. Someone grabbed her arm, and she spun around ready to fight. It was Tom, his face covered in sweat, and his work clothes stained with oil and soot. "Stay back," he said firmly. "The main power core is overheating. If it explodes, it could take out half the colony." Kira looked at his face and saw something she had not expected. Where she thought she would find panic or fear, she saw focused determination. His hands were steady, his voice calm despite the danger. This was not the behavior of a weak creature. "How long do you have?" she asked. "Maybe 20 minutes before the cooling system fails completely," Tom replied, already turning back toward the smoking building. "I need to get inside and manually shut down the reactor." "That's suicide," Kira said, surprising herself by caring. "The radiation levels must be deadly in there." Tom nodded grimly. "Probably, but if I don't try, everyone dies anyway." He looked at her for a moment with those gentle brown eyes. "Take care of yourself, Kira. I'm sorry this marriage was such a burden for you." He turned and ran back toward the building before she could respond. Kira stood frozen, watching the soft human male run directly into mortal danger to save people who were not even his blood relatives. It went against everything she had been taught about human cowardice. The next 3 hours were the longest of Kira's life. She found herself pacing outside the engineering building with the other colonists, all of them waiting for news. Several times she caught herself starting toward the building, wanting to help somehow, then stopping when she remembered she was supposed to hate these people. Finally, the smoke stopped rising, and the dangerous humming sound from inside grew quiet. 10 minutes later, Tom emerged from the building, supported by 2 other engineers. His skin was pale and he moved like every step hurt, but he was alive. The colony's doctor rushed him to the medical center, while the other engineers worked to assess the damage. Kira followed at a distance, telling herself she was just curious about human medical procedures. She definitely was not worried about her fake husband. She spent that night in the medical center's waiting area, ignoring the confused looks from the nurses. When the doctor finally came out, he looked surprised to see her there. "He'll be fine," the doctor said gently. "Radiation exposure was lower than we feared. He should recover completely in a few days." Kira nodded and left without another word, but she felt something strange in her chest. Relief, maybe, though she would not admit it to herself. The next morning she knocked on Tom's bedroom door, for the first time since arriving. When he called for her to enter, she found him sitting up in bed, looking tired but alert. "I brought food," she said awkwardly, holding a tray with soup and bread. It was the first meal she had ever prepared for him. Tom looked genuinely surprised. "Thank you. That's very kind of you." They sat in uncomfortable silence while he ate. Finally, Kira could not hold back her question any longer. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Risk your life for them?" Tom set down his spoon and considered her question seriously. "Because they're my people. Not by blood, maybe, but by choice. We look after each other out here. Even though some of them probably hate you for marrying an alien?" Kira pressed. "Even then," Tom said simply, "doing what's right doesn't depend on whether people appreciate it." Kira stared at him, trying to understand the strange human logic. In Valari culture, you fought for honor, for glory, for your clan's advancement. You did not risk death for ungrateful strangers who might not even like you. "Your people make no sense," she said finally. Tom smiled for the first time since she had known him. "We get that a lot from other species, but it works for us." Over the following days, Kira found herself watching Tom more carefully as he recovered. She noticed how neighbors brought him meals without being asked, how children from the colony came by to draw him pictures, how the other engineers stopped by just to check on him. These humans had built something she did not understand, a community based on caring rather than strength. It still seemed weak to her, but she was beginning to suspect there might be more to human weakness than she had originally thought. Tom had run into that burning building without hesitation, had worked for hours in deadly conditions to save people who could do nothing for him in return. That took a different kind of courage than she was used to seeing. As Tom grew stronger and returned to work, Kira started joining him for meals. Not because she wanted his company, she told herself, but because eating alone had grown boring. She began to ask questions about the colony, about human customs, about why they did things in such inefficient ways. Tom answered her questions patiently, never making her feel stupid for not understanding. Slowly, very slowly, Kira began to see that maybe her punishment was not just about learning to tolerate humans. Maybe it was about learning that there were different ways to be strong. 2 months after the reactor incident, Kira had fallen into an uneasy routine with Tom. They shared meals now, though she still kept her own room and spoke only when necessary. She had begun helping with small tasks around the colony, mainly because sitting idle made her restless. The work was beneath a warrior's dignity, but it gave her something to do besides count the days until her sentence ended. On a cold morning in early autumn, the colony's emergency sirens began wailing. Kira was in the market, square when the sound cut through the air like a blade. Humans around her stopped what they were doing and looked toward the mining complex on the colony's eastern edge. Tom came running from the engineering building, his tool belt bouncing as he moved. "Cave in at Mine 7, he called to the gathering crowd. "The morning shift is trapped inside." Kira felt her warrior blood stirring. This was the kind of crisis, she understood, where action mattered more than words. She followed Tom and the other rescue workers toward the mine entrance, ignoring surprised looks from humans who were not used to seeing her volunteer for anything. The mine shaft entrance was blocked by tons of fallen rock and twisted metal support beams. Smoke drifted up from somewhere deep inside, suggesting electrical fires had started when the ceiling collapsed. The colony's chief engineer, a gray-haired woman named Lisa, was already coordinating the rescue effort. 17 people trapped, Lisa announced grimly. "The main tunnel is completely blocked, and the secondary access shaft is too narrow for our equipment." Kira studied the rubble pile with a warrior's eye for tactical problems. The collapse had been recent enough that the rocks had not settled yet. Any wrong move could bring down more of the ceiling and kill everyone still alive inside. "What about the old maintenance tunnel?" Tom asked, pointing to a barely visible opening near the base of the rockfall. "It runs parallel to the main shaft for about 50 meters before connecting." Lisa shook her head. "That tunnel's only 60 centimeters wide and mostly flooded. Nobody could get through there alive." Kira looked at the narrow opening Tom had indicated. 60 centimeters was tight even for her, but Valari were naturally more flexible than humans. The real problem would be the water and the unstable ceiling above. "I could fit," she said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. This was the first time she had volunteered for anything dangerous since arriving on New Haven. "Absolutely not," Tom said immediately. "That tunnel could collapse at any second. If the water doesn't drown you, the falling rocks will crush you." "Your people are dying in there," Kira replied, surprised by how much that bothered her. "I'm the only one small enough and strong enough to make it through." Lisa looked between them with calculating eyes. "Even if you could reach them, how would you get them out? The tunnel's too narrow for rescues." Kira had already thought of that. "I could carry emergency breathing equipment and medical supplies. Stabilize the injured until you clear the main passage." "It's too dangerous," Tom insisted, stepping closer to her. "I won't let you risk your life for people who barely tolerate your presence here." Something in his voice made Kira look at him more carefully. His face showed genuine fear, but not for himself. He was afraid for her. When had this human started caring whether she lived or died? "This is what warriors do," she said simply. "We face danger so others don't have to." Before anyone could stop her, Kira stripped off her outer clothes and grabbed the emergency kit Lisa held. The maintenance tunnel entrance was even smaller than it looked, barely wide enough for her shoulders. Cold water immediately soaked through her remaining clothes as she crawled into the darkness. The tunnel was a nightmare of jagged metal, loose rocks, and rising water. Kira had to move mostly by touch, feeling her way forward centimeter by centimeter. Several times falling debris nearly crushed her, and twice she had to hold her breath and swim through completely flooded sections. But Valari were built for harsh conditions, and her warrior training had prepared her for far worse. She pressed forward, driven by something she could not quite name. Maybe it was just stubbornness, or maybe it was a memory of Tom's worried face. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes, Kira finally reached the end of the maintenance tunnel. She could hear voices on the other side of a thin rock wall, weak but alive. Using a small explosive charge from the emergency kit, she carefully blasted a hole just large enough to crawl through. The scene inside the collapsed mine was worse than she had expected. Several humans lay unconscious under fallen beams, while others sat against the walls with obvious injuries. The air was thick with dust and smoke, and water was slowly rising from broken pipes. "Who are you?" called a man with a badly cut forehead. "How did you get in here?" "Rescue team," Kira said, not bothering to explain further. She immediately went to work checking the injured, using her enhanced strength to move debris that the humans could not budge. As she worked, something strange began happening. Each time she touched one of the injured humans to check their wounds or move them to safety, she felt a brief jolt of something that was not quite physical. It was like a spark jumping between their skin and hers, carrying emotions and sensations that were not her own. When she helped a young woman with a broken leg, Kira suddenly felt the woman's pain as if it were her own. When she checked the pulse of an unconscious man, she sensed his dreams and memories flickering at the edge of her awareness. The experience was overwhelming and terrifying. Valari had empathic abilities, but they were carefully suppressed from childhood. Her people believed that feeling others' emotions made warriors weak and vulnerable. But somehow, contact with these humans was awakening abilities she had spent her whole life learning to ignore. By the time the main rescue team finally broke through the block tunnel, Kira had stabilized all the injured and organized the survivors into groups. But the empathic episodes were getting stronger. Every touch brought a flood of human thoughts and feelings that made her head spin. Tom was the first through the cleared entrance, his face dirty and exhausted from hours of digging. When he saw Kira alive and unhurt, his relief was so strong she could feel it from across the cavern, without even touching him. "Are you okay?" he asked, rushing to her side. "I'm fine," Kira lied, trying to ignore the way his emotional state seemed to press against her mind like a living thing. As they helped evacuate the last of the survivors, Tom reached out to steady Kira when she stumbled over loose rocks. The moment his hand touched her arm, the empathic connection exploded into full clarity. She felt everything Tom had been hiding from her: his loneliness, his quiet determination, his growing affection for her despite her coldness. She sensed the depth of his character, the steady strength that had nothing to do with physical power. Most shocking of all, she felt his genuine respect for her as a person, not just fear of her as an alien warrior. The connection lasted only a few seconds before she pulled away, but it left her shaken to her core. This was not supposed to happen. Valari warriors did not bond empathically with other species. It went against everything she had been taught about maintaining proper mental defenses. That night, as the colony celebrated a successful rescue, Kira sat alone in her room, trying to understand what was happening to her. The empathic abilities her people had suppressed were awakening, triggered somehow by prolonged contact with humans, specifically with Tom. She could still feel echoes of his emotions from their brief contact, like distant music playing at the edge of her consciousness. For the first time since arriving on New Haven, Kira began to wonder if her punishment might be changing her into something her own people would no longer recognize. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she found herself curious about what she might become as she stopped fighting connection and let herself truly understand the strange, gentle strength of the humans around her. The empathic abilities grew stronger every day after the mine rescue. Kira could no longer ignore the constant flow of emotions from the humans around her. Walking through the colony streets became overwhelming as she felt the happiness of children playing, the worry of parents working late, and the quiet contentment of elderly couples sitting in their gardens. She tried to avoid touching anyone, but it became impossible. Even brief contact when someone handed her something or brushed past her in a crowded space sent waves of foreign feelings through her mind. The worst part was that she was beginning to enjoy some of these connections, especially the positive emotions that her warrior culture had taught her to see as weakness. Tom had noticed her strange behavior, but seemed to think she was just adjusting to colony life. He made an effort to include her in more activities, inviting her to help with his engineering projects and introducing her to neighbors who had grown curious about the Valari warrior living among them. Each interaction made the empathic episode stronger. 3 weeks after the mine incident, Kira was helping Tom repair a water filtration system when he started talking about his life before New Haven. They were working side by side in the cramped equipment room, their hands occasionally touching as they passed tools back and forth. "I wasn't supposed to be here, you know," Tom said quietly, adjusting a connection deep inside the machinery. "My sister Maya was the one chosen for colony service. She's brilliant with environmental systems, much better than me." Kira felt a wave of sadness and guilt flow from him as he spoke. Through their brief touches, she was getting fragments of his memories, images of a young woman with Tom's gentle eyes but a weaker constitution. What happened to her? Kira asked, surprised to find she genuinely wanted to know. Tom's hand stilled on the equipment. She got sick. Some rare blood disorder that the doctor said would get worse if she left Earth's medical facilities. The colony's service contract had penalties that would have bankrupted our whole family if she couldn't fulfill it. Another touch as he handed her a wrench sent more of the story flooding into Kira's mind. She saw Tom volunteering to take his sister's place, saw him saying goodbye to Maya at a medical facility, felt his determination to make the sacrifice worthwhile. "So you came here instead," Kira said. "Yeah." And then 6 months later, the authorities contacted me about the diplomatic marriage program. They needed someone who was already committed to staying on New Haven for several years. Tom looked at her with those steady brown eyes. "I figure if I was going to be alone anyway, I might as well do something useful for peace between our species." The casual way he talked about sacrifice made Kira's chest tight. Through the empathic connection, she could feel that Tom had never regretted his choices, had never blamed her for the strange situation they found themselves in. He genuinely saw their marriage as an opportunity to help both their peoples understand each other better. "Your sister, is she better now?" Kira asked. Tom smiled, and she felt his joy like warm sunlight. "Much better. The treatments worked, and she's back to designing atmospheric processors on Mars. She sends me messages every week about her latest projects." As the days passed, Kira found herself sharing more of her own story with Tom. She told him about growing up in a warrior house, where showing emotion was considered dangerous weakness. She explained how Valari children were trained from an early age to suppress their natural empathic abilities, to build mental walls that would protect them in battle. "But you're feeling our emotions now," Tom observed one evening as they sat in their small garden watching the sunset. "Doesn't that go against your training?" Kira nodded reluctantly. "It should be impossible. Valari who lose control of their mental defenses are considered mentally ill. They're usually sent away from warrior society to live quietly on farming worlds." "That sounds lonely," Tom said softly. The comment triggered another empathic flash, and Kira suddenly felt Tom's own loneliness, not just from his time on New Haven, but from years of being the responsible one, the one who sacrificed his own wants for others' needs. She realized that beneath his calm exterior, Tom was just as isolated as she was, just in a different way. "It is lonely," Kira admitted, "but I always thought that was the price of strength." Tom turned to look at her directly. Maybe strength doesn't have to mean being alone. That night, Kira dreamed of her home world for the first time in months. But instead of the proud warrior halls she remembered, she saw them through new eyes. She noticed the rigid postures that never relaxed, the careful distances people maintained from each other, the way even family members seemed to guard their thoughts and feelings like military secrets. She woke up wondering if her people's idea of strength was actually just another kind of weakness, the weakness of being afraid to truly connect with others. The next morning brought news that changed everything. A Valari military ship had been detected entering the system, flying under a diplomatic flag. The colony's communications center received a formal message requesting permission to dock and retrieve warrior Kira for urgent consultation with Valari High Command. Tom found Kira in the garden, staring up at the sky where the approaching ship would soon be visible. Her face showed no expression, but through their growing empathic bond, he could feel her turmoil. "They're coming for you," he said simply. "Yes." Kira's voice was steady, but Tom felt the conflict raging inside her. "My brother Dex is the ship's captain. The message said I'm accused of mental contamination by prolonged exposure to inferior species." The words, inferior species, hung in the air between them. Tom felt the pain they caused Kira to say, even though she tried to keep her voice neutral. "What does that mean exactly?" Tom asked. "It means they know about the empathic awakening. Someone has been watching me, reporting on my behavior." Kira finally looked at him, and her red eyes showed an emotion he had never seen there before: fear. "If they determine I've been mentally compromised by human contact, the penalty is death." Tom felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. The idea of losing Kira, of her being executed for the crime of learning to understand humans, filled him with rage and helplessness. "There has to be something we can do," he said. Kira shook her head. "Valari military law is absolute. I have 1 day to prepare my defense before Captain Dex arrives. If I cannot prove my mind is still pure of human influence, I will be executed as an example to other Valari who might consider fraternizing with your species." Tom reached out and took her hand without thinking. The moment their skin touched, the empathic connection flared stronger than ever before. But this time, instead of just feeling his emotions, Kira felt something else, a deep, unshakable certainty that whatever happened, they would face it together. "Then we have 1 day to figure out how to save your life," Tom said firmly. "And I'm not letting them take you without a fight." For the first time since receiving the message, Kira felt something that might have been hope. Through their joined hands, she could feel Tom's determination flowing into her own mind, mixing with her warrior instincts to create something new and powerful. Maybe her brother was right about mental contamination, but if this was what weakness felt like, Kira was beginning to think the Valari had been wrong about a lot of things. The Valari warship landed on New Haven's main pad like a dark metal predator. Kira watched through the window as armored warriors marched down the loading ramp, their movements precise and threatening. At their head walked Captain Dex, her brother, his red eyes scanning the human colony with obvious disgust. Tom stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Through their empathic connection, she could feel his calm determination mixing with her own battle-ready tension. Over the past day, they had discovered that their bond worked both ways. She could share her enhanced awareness and combat instincts with him just as easily as she could feel his emotions. "Remember the plan?" Tom said quietly as the Valari delegation approached their house. Kira nodded, though part of her still thought the plan was insane. When Dex knocked on their door with sharp military precision, she opened with her head held high like a true warrior. "Sister," Dex said in formal Valari, his voice cold as space ice, "you will come with us now to answer charges of mental contamination and betrayal of your species." "I am still fulfilling the terms of my legal sentence," Kira replied in the same language. "You have no authority to remove me early." Dex's scarred face twisted into a sneer. "We have reports that you have bonded empathically with this human male, that you have allowed inferior alien thoughts to pollute your warrior mind. Such contamination voids any previous legal arrangements." Behind Dex stood 4 other Valari warriors, all of them armed and ready for trouble. The human colonists had gathered at a safe distance to watch, their faces showing fear and anger in equal measure. "These are serious accusations," Kira said calmly. "Under Valari law, I have the right to trial by combat to defend my honor." Dex laughed harshly. "You would challenge me? Your own brother? You have become truly mad from human influence." "Not me," Kira said, stepping aside to let Tom move forward. "My legal husband will fight as my champion." The silence that followed was complete. Every Valari warrior stared at Tom with expressions ranging from shock to outright amusement. Captain Dex looked like someone had just told him the funniest joke in the galaxy. "A human?" Dex said in disbelief, switching to English so Tom could understand. "You want this soft creature to fight a Valari warrior in single combat?" Tom stepped forward, his engineer's clothes and calm demeanor making him look ridiculous next to the armored aliens. I accept the challenge on behalf of my wife. What are the terms? Dex studied Tom like he was examining an interesting insect. Hand-to-hand combat. No weapons. Fight until one opponent yields or dies. When I defeat you, the human woman will return with us for immediate execution. And if Tom wins? Kira asked, if this impossible thing happens, you may complete your sentence here, without further interference. Dex's voice made it clear he thought the outcome was already decided. The combat circle was drawn in the colony's central square. Word spread quickly, and both humans and Valari gathered to watch this unprecedented match. Tom removed his shirt and tools while Kira helped him stretch, their empathic connection allowing her to share her knowledge of Valari fighting techniques directly with his mind. "Can you feel what I feel?" she whispered as they prepared. Tom nodded, his eyes reflecting the shared awareness flowing between them. Your reflexes, your tactical thinking. It's like having a warrior's instincts downloaded into my brain. Use them, Kira said. But remember, your human endurance is your advantage. Valari fight hard and fast, but we tire quickly. Make him chase you. When the circle was ready, Dex stripped his waist, revealing the massive muscle and scars of a veteran warrior. He stood nearly 7 feet tall and moved with predatory grace. Tom looked like a child beside him. Last chance to surrender, human. Dex called out, "I will make your death quick if you yield now." Tom settled into a fighting stance that combined human martial arts with Valari techniques, flowing through their empathic bond. "I'm ready when you are." Dex attacked immediately, his speed inhuman as he closed the distance. But Tom was already moving, guided by Kira's combat awareness shared through their connection. He rolled under Dex's charge and came up behind a bigger warrior, landing a solid hit to the kidneys before dancing away. The crowd gasped as Dex staggered and spun around, his face showing genuine surprise. No human should have been able to avoid that attack, much less counter it. For the next 10 minutes, the fight continued in a pattern that frustrated Dex more with each exchange. Tom would not stand still and trade blows like a proper warrior. Instead, he used mobility and timing, always moving, always striking when Dex was off balance or overextended. Through their bond, Kira fed Tom her knowledge of every Valari fighting technique, every weakness in their combat style. Tom used his human flexibility and endurance to exploit those weaknesses, turning Dex's own aggression against him. Gradually, the massive Valari warrior began to slow. His attacks became wilder, less controlled, as frustration and exhaustion took their toll. Tom, meanwhile, seemed to grow stronger as the fight progressed, his movements becoming more fluid as he learned to fully integrate Kira's shared instincts. The end came suddenly. Dex made one final desperate charge, pouring all his remaining strength into a killing blow. Tom waited until the last possible second, then dropped low and swept Dex's legs while the warrior was committed to his attack. The captain crashed to the ground hard, and Tom was on him instantly, applying a chokehold that cut off blood flow to his brain. "Yield," Tom said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the silent square. Dex struggled for a few more seconds, then tapped the ground in surrender. Tom immediately released him and stepped back, offered his hand to help the fallen warrior to his feet. The gesture shocked the watching Valari more than the victory itself. In their culture, defeated enemies were not helped up. They were left to struggle or given mercy killings if they were too injured to continue. Dex stared at Tom's outstretched hand for a long moment, then slowly reached up to accept the help. As their hands touched, something passed between them. Not the empathic bond that Kira shared with Tom, but a moment of understanding between warriors who had tested each other's strength. "How?" Dex asked in wonder. "How did a human defeat me?" Tom looked across the circle to where Kira stood, watching with tears in her eyes. "Because I wasn't fighting alone. Your sister showed me that real strength comes from connection, not isolation." Dex followed his gaze to Kira, seeing her as if for first time. The rigid warrior mask she had worn all her life was gone, replaced by something more open and alive. She was still unmistakably Valari, still dangerous and proud, but she had become something new as well. "The empathic bond," Dex said slowly. You shared your abilities with him. I shared everything, Kira replied, and he shared his strength with me. Together we're more than either of us could be alone. The other Valari warriors were murmuring among themselves, their certainty about human weakness shaken by what they had witnessed. One human had defeated their captain in fair combat, but only because he had been connected to a Valari warrior in a way their culture claimed was impossible. Dex looked around at his warriors, then at the mixed crowd of humans and aliens watching expectantly. According to our law, you have won the right to complete your sentence here without interference. But I think perhaps your sentence is already complete. He turned to address both communities. What I have seen today suggests that both our peoples have much to learn from each other. With the High Council's permission, I would like to establish a permanent embassy here on New Haven. 6 months later, Kira stood in the same spot where she had first arrived as a prisoner. But now she wore the uniform of a diplomatic ambassador, and Tom stood beside her as an equal partner rather than a reluctant host. Their marriage had evolved from a legal necessity into a genuine partnership that was changing how both species viewed each other. The empathic abilities that her people had once called contamination were now recognized as a bridge between worlds. Other Valari volunteers had come to New Haven to learn the techniques Tom and Kira had discovered, while human diplomats traveled to Valari space to share their own insights about cooperation and community. Any regrets? Tom asked as they watched a new group of exchange students arrive from both species. Kira took his hand, feeling the warm flow of shared emotions and thoughts that had become as natural as breathing, only that it took me so long to understand what real strength looked like. Together, they walked toward the landing pad to welcome the newcomers to what had become more than just a human colony. New Haven was now a symbol of what two very different species could accomplish when they chose connection over isolation, understanding over fear. The punishment that was meant to humble a warrior had instead created something neither species had imagined possible, a new way of being strong that honored both the fierce independence of the Valari and the cooperative spirit of humanity. And at the center of it all was a marriage that had started as a sentence but had become the foundation for peace between the stars.